And away we go. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Royals Rundown podcast presented by Royals Review. I am Jacob Milham, joined this evening by Jeremy Greco. Jeremy, we have a very special guest with us this evening, and how we feeling about that?
Mildly excited, I think.
Mildly excited. All right. Well, you don't have to shroud it too much. We are joined this evening by Michael Baumann of FanGraphs, and you can also find his Substack Wheelie Sports over there, talking about all things cycling. Michael, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me. I'm mildly excited to be here.
Fair enough. Well, hey Michael, we are very, very excited to talk about some Kansas City Royals baseball with you, your writing journey, and just the overall baseball offseason. It's been kind of quiet outside of the Kansas City Royals. But before we hop into that, we do have to shout out RoyalsReview.com, the website that makes this podcast happen. If you want to go interact with Jeremy's very divisive Deadpool and Wolverine review that he put up yesterday, you can go find that over there. But also the Royals rumblings, more hot takes about Jonathan India, and you can find it all over at RoyalsReview.com. So, Michael, when we asked you to join us, there wasn't a whole lot of Kansas City Royals stuff to talk about. It was like, hey, this is a cool time to talk about the good season in retrospect. But now the Royals have arguably made the biggest move of the offseason so far, trading away Brady Singer to the Cincinnati Reds in exchange for, notably, Jonathan India. Michael, what did you think when you saw the move?
Well, as a huge fan of the 2016 Florida Gators, I was very excited to see two of the top freshman performers from one of my favorite college baseball teams of all time mentioned in the same trade. India is an interesting guy. He's been sort of the odd man out of that glut of young infielders that the Reds have had, and all of a sudden he's not that young anymore. He's almost 28. He's fine, I think, at second and third base. I was talking to some people who think that maybe he doesn't have quite the arm to play third like he did in college, and a little bit coming up through the pro ranks. That said, the Royals can find a spot for him. Like, this is a team that, I like Michael Massey a lot. I don't think that I think Michael Garcia is a useful piece. I'm not that enamored with the bat, but I think the defense versatility and the speed makes him, I think, an ideal fifth infielder. I was really impressed with what I saw of him when I was covering the series in Baltimore in the playoffs. That also, I think, accounted for like 70% of the hits he produced in those two games. 70% of the hits for the entire season. So it's interesting. Singer is part of a rebuilding process that the Royals had, as you guys know, where they were having a lot of time or having a lot of trouble developing talent. They just got a lot of really advanced college arms in the first couple rounds of the draft. And I thought that was a great idea, and it really super didn't work. And Singer is one of the few guys from that group who, I would say, turned into an okay big league starter. The consensus on this trade seems to be that these are two kind of average, maybe a little bit below average players who are both going to be a lot worse in their new environment than they were in their old one. So, I can understand why people might turn their nose up at this trade, but at the same time, I love a challenge trade. I love a trade of two guys at different positions with different skills. It's at a similar point in their career. I think they're a lot more interesting than star for prospects trades or big leaguer for prospects trades. So, and good for the Royals for trying something different. Singer didn't really participate in the postseason. He's I think he's expendable at this point, given the success they've had in the free agent market in the starting rotation. Infield, apart from Bobby Witt Jr., it's a need. Bobby Witt Jr. counts as two. He's good enough to count as two all-star infielders, but I think that the Royals would prefer to maybe have that be a little less literal going forward.
Yeah, hopefully so. Jeremy, what do you think, man?
Yeah, so I think maybe I have some Royals colored glasses on, but when I look at this trade, I see, two imperfect players, certainly, but I would say they're both above average, at least in terms of their output. Brady Singer, obviously, we've talked about him a million times. He's very good, but he does have, his flaws. I do share Michael's concern with, how is he going to play in Cincinnati. But as we talked about when we were talking about this trade as a rumor, he's got a lot of ground ball ability, so that might help him out there. And then Jonathan India, he does have some concerns with his batted balls and with his power. But when you've got the larger outfield that Kauffman has, his home runs are going to come down, but maybe the singles go up as teams have to defend more outfield. And also he brings that career 350 OBP to the leadoff spot, where the Royals, I think, if I'm remembering this correctly, had 270 at that spot last year. 80 points of OBP is a lot, even if that's all he adds there. And it is the really interesting thing going forward from here, I think, is going to be, is India a second baseman or is he a third baseman? I did note that when MLB writer, Royals beat writer Annie Rogers was writing up this trade, she repeatedly referred to India as second baseman Jonathan India, not infielder Jonathan India, which I think is probably telling. And she also mentioned that Michael Massey had offered to play in the outfield last year, and that the Royals think he can play in the outfield, specifically left field. So it does seem plausible that they might try to start India at second base and put Massey in left field, and so kind of use India to cover their outfield needs in that way. But the last thought I had is that when we talked about this as a potential trade, as a trade rumor, I said I don't want to do Brady Singer for Jonathan India straight up. I feel like that's not quite enough. I want them to throw something else in there. So throwing in Joey Wiemer, I think is how you say his name, as a fourth outfielder, as probably at this point a platoon partner for Kyle Isbell, is really promising to me. And he has that prospect pedigree. I think he was once a top 3 prospect on Baseball America list. So overall, like, not just it was in the Brewers system at the time. So that he's a guy with a lot of upside that maybe they can get even more out of him somehow.
Maybe so, and I will be interested to see what they do with Joey. Jeremy, I think, like, right now my floor for his expectations would be having a nice platoon between him and Isbell, which is good. I'm not going to shed a tear for basically ensuring that Garrett Hampson is not going to be back with the Kansas City Royals. I'm not going to be sad about that. But yeah, Michael, to your point about the makeup of this trade, I do enjoy it as well, because this addresses an immediate need for the Kansas City Royals, rather than having to sell the fan base and the promise of prospects, especially in a system that has not cashed in on that prospect power recently. Instead, you are getting, hey, this is a guy who's going to be able to help you out for the next 2 years in a spot that you really need it. And frankly, his on-base ability is good enough where I think for the Royals, you have to find a spot for him defensively. Massey's back issues will be interesting to see how they affect him making a possible transition to the outfield. But India is more than capable of also being an above-average defender at second base, if I'm correct in that, Michael.
Yeah. And I think it's a couple things with him. The on-base ability, I think, he had a great year last year in terms of drawing walks, and that it sort of came along with the power that he showed in college, and then as a rookie backing up. So, particularly moving from Cincinnati to KC, if he goes from a 20 homer guy to like a 9 home run guy, I wouldn't be surprised if he's playing the whole season.
Yeah.
But you'll notice a lot of his OBP comes from getting hit by pitches. He's good for 15 or 20 a year. And I think that speaks to one, like, this is by no means an impact player. I think that, on a good team, he is what he kind of was on the Reds, which is a very good backup, maybe a starter that you want to try to improve on. And you just look at, looking at what the Royals were putting out there offensively, Yuli Gurriel in the middle of the lineup in the playoff series, there was just so much absolute dreck in that lineup last year. They got away with it. And I'm glad to see that they're taking steps to make sure it's not the same thing again. I think I'm much lower on Wiemer than you guys are. This is a guy who was in 2 situations that were pretty desperate for outfield help and couldn't crack the majors in either one of them last year. There's very, very little power in that bat at this point in his career. Maybe you bank on the athleticism. At the same time, like, he's better than some of the guys the Royals had last year. So, via con Dios. But I think India is a guy, just in terms of, I don't want to be the FanGraphs guy who goes out and talks about like makeup, but I think that having that kind of, dirtbag grinder attitude, it's, maybe it makes a guy who's maybe a 2-win player on paper a little bit more valuable to the team, and that attitude is a little more contagious. And so, I was not really sure why the Reds were in such a big hurry to get rid of him. I know that they've got a lot of talent coming up through the minor leagues, but they've had a lot of talent coming up behind him in the minor leagues. But I just like him if he's your leadoff hitter, I think maybe that's a little bit disappointing. But as a guy who could be there, he's not an automatic out in the bottom third of the lineup. I think that's the best place for him, and I think that's worth getting excited for, considering what he's upgrading over.
Okay. I think the where my confusion came in from the Reds' perspective is why they were in a hurry to make a move of this tier. Like they definitely have a rotation that you could improve upon, right? But they also have some names, notably Rhett Lauder, coming down the pipeline that should be ready for 2025. You think, and you add Brady Singer to the fold, 2 more years of team control. And then you have Nick Martinez picking up his qualifying offer. Like it's a very crowded room all of a sudden. It seems like. I'm just hopeful that this works out for Singer and for the Royals. Jeremy and I have had our fair share to say about Brady Singer's pitching arsenal and sometimes his demeanor on the mound. Overall, like he did a lot of good things for the Kansas City Royals.
Yeah, what I'll say about that is basically, unless you're the Phillies or Mariners, you're gonna need more than 5 starting pitchers, and 5 guys who can like actually go into the 5th or 6th inning, even if it's sort of like a low 4 ERA, which is what Singer is in an optimistic viewpoint. So like even if they get Rhett Lauder, even if Hunter Green stays healthy, even if Andrew Abbott's good, like Nick Lodolo is going to get hurt. It's just stuff like that. They're going to need him to be that number 5, number 6 starter. Those guys cost, and you think, last year's free agent market, like Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn were getting well north of $10 million a year. And these guys are maybe more expensive than teams like the Royals and Reds would usually be shopping for. Now they're getting later in arbitration, but it's still cheaper than the alternative. So I think they're just shuffling their pieces around in a way that makes the roster fit slightly better.
Okay. Jeremy, any closing thoughts on the Singer India trade?
Nope. I'm excited to see how it plays out, and I hope Michael's wrong about how good India's going to be. That's all.
I think he'll be fine.
Listen,
I don't think he's going to be transformative. I think he's an upgrade for sure, but
the argument I kept making last year about the Royals is that when you upgrade very bad to average, it's a huge upgrade, even if you're not getting a great player, but it feels like you are just because it's not so bad anymore. And I feel like hopefully that's what we're going to see here.
I think that's exactly what this trade is from a position player perspective. And if you could backfill that spot in the rotation, then it's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, for sure. And unfortunately, we're going to have to wait till spring to see how that rotation shapes up a little bit, but I'm pretty confident in that top 3. If you want to keep tabs on all things that the Royals are trying to do to fill out that rotation, make sure you go follow along with RoyalsReview.com. You can also follow along with them on Twitter, on Blue Sky, and Facebook at Royals Review. Michael, you talked about some of I think the word you used was dreck.
Yeah.
It's a very, that's one of those words that has schmutz dripping off the edges of that K. But that's kind of how 2024's lineup looked at points. But they got it done, a 30-win improvement from 56 wins to 86. You lose in the divisional series to the eventual AL champions, New York Yankees. Not a bad way to go out, if you ask me. Over at FanGraphs, like what were you thinking watching the Royals over the entire season?
I was always very impressed with their rotation. I think, Cole Reagan's popped immediately once he joined that team. And I guess Seth Lugo had kind of established himself before he came to the Royals. And Michael Wacha was one of those guys who was like, yeah, he's fine. He turned out to be really good. And like, once you get those pieces set up, that's, it's a weapon. You know, we saw how hard up everybody was for starting pitching in the postseason, and the Royals didn't run out. And it like this is Major League Baseball is very much becoming like college baseball, where in the playoffs it's all about who runs out of pitchers first. And the Royals, for as bad as that bullpen was for a lot of the season, as bad as the rest of the lineup was, they could get out all the way to the very end. And even though they lost to the Yankees, I think they gave a pretty good account of themselves way out there. And so, I didn't pay a huge amount of attention to them during the regular season because I assumed that, just watching the win totals come up, this team was awful 2023. And we're like, okay, they're mediocre. They've got a lot of players. Like Witt's really good. Massey's a guy I've liked since college. Maybe a little slow or a little low upside. Watching MJ Melendez play defense, I think, was just a decision I had to make for my own mental health. And they upgraded a lot of key spots during the course of the season. I'm a huge fan of Lucas Erceg, dating back to his days in Oakland. I managed to have a conversation with him when I was down in Baltimore for the playoffs, and was really impressed by his outlook and his intensity on the mound. So I think he could be a really good closer for them going forward. And what I like about this, so I like a couple things about this team. One is just the calm environment that they have, and it's they seemed like they had been there before. And I covered a Royals playoff series live for this, and it was these were the very first games that I was credentialed for as a major league reporter way back in 2015 in Houston. And that's how long it had been since this team had been relevant, basically. And Salvador Perez is the only guy who's been around. But I was really impressed by whether that's just the direct Sal Perez influence, how much of that is Matt Quatraro, who I was knew very little about before he got the managerial job, and was really impressed with the way that he managed his pitching staff in terms of being proactive while also setting expectations and sticking with a plan. I thought he did a really good job this postseason. Based on what I know now, Stephen Vogt was going to run away with Manager of the Year, but I think the Q had a pretty good case for it. So I like a lot of the building blocks, but one of the things I like most about this team is in terms of the way it's set up. It's not just they've got the guys who it's hard to get. It's hard to get a Bobby Witt Jr. It's hard to get a Cole Reagans, and they've got those guys already. And they're winning in spite of the rest of a lot of the rest of the team just being terrible. And, this goes back to what Jeremy was saying, is it's easy to upgrade an F to a C. It's very difficult to upgrade a C to an A, which is what the Phillies, the team that, I spend most of my time around, they're having trouble, looking at, can we win with Alec Boehm or Nick Castellanos in the lineup when the Royals probably kill to have those guys in the lineup.
Yeah.
And but it's so much easier to go from 0 wins to two wins at a given position than it is to go from 2 wins to 4 or 5. And so these are places where it's easy to fix. And, we talk about this being a small market team and not really spending a whole lot. And that's, there's some extent to which that's true, and some to which, they have spent, and some extent to which it's a valid excuse for this team, and some to which it's not. You don't have to spend that much money to just fill out the rest of the team around Bobby Witt Jr. And I think that they've done a pretty good job of doing that so far. And it's just the next step is, they built this into an 86-win team that has enough pitching to upset one better team and has had enough to make the Yankees sweat a little bit. And now they've got to build a team that can actually beat it. And, this is the struggle that the Brewers have had in the last decade, a struggle that the Rays have had on and off since 2008. That's that's where the GM makes his money, basically. So I think this trade is a good step, but they're going to need to be active in free agency. They're going to need to continue to be creative in trades in order to really make this, keep this going.
Okay. Jeremy?
One of my favorite things about the Royals since last offseason has been that general manager JJ Piccolo comes out and says, we need this, this, and this. And then he goes out and gets this, this, and this. He actually makes the moves. I don't know how it works, on a lot of other clubs, because I follow the Royals primarily. And I know under Dayton Moore, it was always, everyone will just get better. and it'll be fine. And, we might look to fill in some holes, but he never gave specifics, and he always acted like everything was fine. And then JJ Piccolo, he gives us a shopping list. He said last offseason, I want 2 starting pitchers, I want an outfielder. And he went out and got those. I want some bullpen help. He went out and got that. Not the bullpen help didn't help, but he did go out and get it.
It's unpredictable. It's tough to go out and get bullpen help sometimes.
And this offseason, he says, we want to keep Michael Wacha. They do. He says, we want to get some OBP. He did. And after that, he said, well, now we've got to maybe backfill, like you were saying, they need to backfill the rotation. He mentioned that as well. And he's also at one point said they need a middle of the order bat, which they don't have yet. So it's exciting for me as a Royals fan right now to be like, oh, they're actually going to go get those. You said, they need those 2-win players, those C players. They're going to actually look for them and try to get them, which is, I feel like not a lot of teams are out there doing that.
At least being vocal and transparent about the process is refreshing, I would say, from a Royals fan perspective. Michael, I do want to ask you a little bit about Alec Bohm, but before I do, what enraptures you so much with Michael Massey? Because he's kind of a guy that's on the fringe of the core for a lot of casual Royals fans, but I don't think a lot of folks underestimate his real potential, is what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, enraptured is probably too strong a word, but it's...
I like using too strong words.
So do I. So, first of all, one of my first jobs in baseball was covering the Big Ten for D1 baseball when it was just starting to get off the ground. This was a year when Illinois lost 1 game in conference all year, and they were a national seed and one of the best Midwestern teams ever. And because of that, I was living in Columbus, Ohio at the time, and was spending so much time driving back and forth to Champaign that I did the math, and it was I told my bosses, I could have saved you money by renting an apartment and just moving to Champaign-Urbana. And so Massey being an Illinois guy, those guys I've always had a soft spot for. I just, I think there's just so little that's spectacular about him. It's average at best athleticism. It's average at best defense. He's a second baseman who you say, oh, he's going to move to the outfield. Well, does he have the legs to play center field? No, maybe he can hold up physically in left, but it's, he's a guy who could just produce offense, and it's decent power. It's not a lot of walks, but it's, you just look up at the end of the day and it's oh, this is a league average hitter, maybe a little bit better. It has looked completely unremarkable every step of the way. I think that this comp is maybe going to flatter Massey a little bit, but I was a huge Neil Walker fan. If you remember Neil Walker from the Pirates, just the most boring looking white dude, 6 foot 200. And he was a first round pick. I was why? He played the most boring position for the most boring team, and he was just a good player for 10 years. And I think that, I don't know if Massey gets all the way there, but I respect guys who just sort of, they just hit 270 at every level. And that's just what he's doing.
Okay. All right. I had to dig in a little deeper on that because I was curious. You don't hear a whole lot of folks talk about Massey like that,
and, Yeah, and I don't think he's a core guy, and I think that India's better than him, and he's expendable, but I think he's a useful player, and I think that he insofar as you can look forward off of this, but I think he had a pretty good postseason too. So
yeah, he did.
Maybe you got something there, and that's what. And when you're operating in the way that the Royals are, Massey being an 80 WRC plus guy versus being a 95 or 100 WRC plus guy, that can be the difference between winning the AL Central and not.
Yeah, very true. Very true. So while we're talking about the infield, I know many fan bases around baseball, they're talking about Alec Bohm. I mean, he had an all-star year, and hearing him come up specifically and very explicitly as being available on the trade market, well, that caught the attention of Royals fans too, especially with third base being a need right now. I mean, what do you think the asking price for a guy like Alec Bohm is?
It's someone who can help right now. And that's and you're looking at the Phillies, what do they need? I don't know that the Royals really got what they need right now, because you would need somebody to fill in that position. And their other big position of need is center field, basically, where Brandon Marsh is stretched a little bit. defensively, and Johan Rojas, whom I love, who's an incredible defender and a great runner, just about as bad a hitter as he would have fit right in the bottom of the Royals lineup last year. I can see why Bohm is so interesting to Royals fans, in addition to the local connection. I don't know. The Midwest is big. Does Wichita State count as local to?
Yeah,
okay.
For sure.
So, there's that. There's the fact that he's still relatively young and cost controlled, and just he's a really interesting player to me because he has so much raw power that his swing is just so ill-equipped to access in a game, but it makes him a good hitter in other ways. He's a very, very good contact hitter for not a lot of bat speed. It's kind of a long looping swing, and it's all fields, not home run power, but, line drives, doubles. And he just looked completely lost down the stretch and in the postseason last year. And he's, had some, I don't know how closely you guys follow this out here. You remember the I hate this effing place moment. Made an error in a game, I want to say early 2022, and got caught on camera as he was getting booed saying, I hate this effing place. And this, in the course of the game, I remember it turned into the biggest story in Philadelphia sports media. And by the end of the game, and he ended up getting 3 hits, and the Phillies came back to win that game. And so he got asked about it in the game, and he said, "Yeah, I said it. I was upset. Sorry." Everybody just loved appreciated the honesty. That you could just be I'm not trying to fool you. I'm pissed off. I'm not actually pissed off at you guys. We all say things we don't mean when we're upset, but that really reared its head again in the playoffs. It got bad enough that people out here were comparing him to Ben Simmons, which is the worst insult a Philadelphia sports fan can level at an athlete. So he comes back. It's going to be interesting, but also I think some of these trade rumors it's obvious the Phillies need a shakeup, and he's one of the few guys who's not integral to the team, who still has trade value. And so it would have to be a challenge trade. I don't know what the fit is, though, because, just speaking selfishly, I don't really want Kyle Isbell back or something like that. And, and that surfeit of pitching, that, that's one thing the Phillies actually have more of than they can use, and they can go get more of it. So maybe it happens in a 3-team deal. And again, the Phillies are very tight-lipped when it comes. They're actually the opposite of JJ Piccolo. When Dave Dombrowski or Sam Fuld or whoever goes on the record, it's very direct. But they don't leak. You don't know anything about their intentions until they actually do it. And so they're kind of like the Braves in this respect. And so the fact that this got leaked, I'm curious about what that means, or if it's just he was so bad in the postseason that it was obvious and there's no sense in trying to obfuscate about it. So I think Bohm would be a good complementary hitter. I think, doubles power, maybe he could be a little bit more of a big fish in a small pond out in Kansas City. That would help him. But on balance, I think he's a good player. And he just had a really terrible week when the lights were brightest but at the same time, he's had good postseason performances before that. So maybe he needs a change of scenery, or maybe he'll just come back and everybody will forget about this by mid-May. So we'll see.
Maybe so. Jeremy, what would you think about a guy like Bohm? I mean, I kind of like him for that 5 spot behind Salvi. I don't think that's a bad fit.
I mean, that would be fine, but like Michael was saying, who are the Royals going to give up for him? He doesn't want Isbell, and I don't want to give up Isbell. So I feel like we're kind of at an impasse, and the Royals have pitching that they can trade. They have no hitters. They're not trading Bobby Witt Jr. Nobody wants Salvador Perez as much as he's integral to Kansas City. So
you don't want to trade him. I was going to say, there have been some JT Realmuto trade rumors too. So maybe
really,
yeah.
Huh.
So, but yeah, well, let's just shake things up and let's trade Salvador Perez.
Yeah, I don't see
that'd be a hell of a podcast for you guys.
Had to have been last offseason before they were good again.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Michael, I mean, you bring up the 3-team, maybe if they can find a dance partner that works out. But right now it's a good thing to wish and dream upon a little bit.
He'd be the second best hitter in that lineup right now, I think. So
There you go.
You
I'll take
would
that.
be right to want him, but the mechanics of this trade in particular have to require a third team, I think.
Gotcha. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I kind of feel like they did their trade by getting India. I feel like the Royals aren't likely to make another huge move via trade because that was the guy they could afford to give up was Brady Singer. We all knew it. We all said all offseason, all postseason, all late season, Brady Singer is going to be the guy to go. I don't know who else they feel like they can trade. Maybe Alec Marsh or Chris Bubich, but I don't think anybody super wants them.
Maybe not. Maybe Marsh.
And it's back end starters and relievers. That's where they've got depth, and those are guys you can go get on the free agent market. And that's what I was going to say. Another thing I like about their position is that they can go out. Their positions of need are positions where you can go out and sign a guy without, like, these are the 12 to $15 million players and not the 20, $30 million players. Like, I heard about Paul Goldschmidt last week, and if he's a player who you want to bet on a bounce back, they have an open spot at DH, which not everybody does. And so, outfield corner, you can go be the team that tries to teach Tyler O'Neill how to stretch. There are options out there if you want to get good players for not that much of the positions where the Royals have need. So, it's going to require a little bit of investment, but it's not going to require a ton. And so I think that a repeat of last year's offseason plan, just with position players in mind, could do them a lot of good.
That's also been what I've been thinking a lot, is just do what you did last year, but with position players.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, please. And Michael, you bring up, like, Phillies fans aren't going to be, they wouldn't be mad to see Bohm back in 2025, but it would be a little like, okay,
I'll be mad no matter what. But I don't think it, like, I wouldn't be surprised. I think he's a good player. I think that everybody would get used to it pretty quick. But
I gotcha. I was on a lower level. I was thinking Royals fans would have a similar reaction to seeing Michael Garcia back there as the opening day third baseman. It's just like, well, we really don't want him here, but at least we got someone else.
I feel like the reaction to Garcia is going to be more negative than to having Bohm back. Just because Michael, he's so good defensively and he's such a good base runner, but I still believe that he's got a breakout in him. Maybe I'm crazy, but this is what I've been saying all off season on the podcast too, is you can't count on him to break out. You can't be like, well, you're the starting third baseman and we'll go to the playoffs if you break out, and we won't if you don't, so break out. You have to be prepared to go without him, and then if he does break out, go, okay, well, now we're a really good team instead of just a good team. So they've got to find something, I think, for third base. Though, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe having India at second and putting Massey in left and maybe someone else in the corner outfield, and you're like, well, now Michael Garcia is batting 8th or 9th, and it's fine because of his defense.
But for that reason, I think he has trade value. And perhaps more than you would think, because he's younger and cheaper, and because somebody's going to look at exactly what you said, the defense and the base running, and look at him and think, I can fix him. And maybe there's, a quarter outfield bat or a really good reliever who comes the other way. And, but at the same time, I think if you go into next season with him as in an infield mix, I think that offers you the ability to make situational substitutions, play some platoon matchups. And, I think you can get the best out of him by exposing him to less disadvantageous matchups.
Absolutely.
Okay. Michael, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your writing journey and what you do and stuff like that. But first, I do have to ask: do you have a ballot? Are you a ballot guy?
Not yet.
Still getting there?
No, I am. I think I'm either 3 or 4 seasons short.
Oh, really?
I'm a writer, not a mathematician. So I joined the BBWA in 2018. Oh, that's 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm 3 seasons away. So
okay.
Soon, but not yet.
Gotcha. Almost there. Hey, what do you think about Billy Wagner? Is he going to get in the series figure?
I don't know if he's going to get in. I would vote for him if I had a ballot. I think that I've got take kind of a dim view of the single inning closer as a Hall of Fame candidate, and maybe history will force me to reevaluate that as guys like Craig Kimbrell and Kenley Jansen get on the ballot. But he was so underrated. I think he was better than Trevor Hoffman. I would have voted for him over Hoffman without thinking about it. And he was good for reason, like he was underrated because he pitched in a time when the save was the currency. And he got, and at a time where circumstance is what separated the 30 save guys from the 55 save guys, and not their actual ability. And he was, just in terms of one inning in the late 90s, like he's probably in the tier with, one step below Mariano Rivera. Like Jonathan Papelbon came along a little bit later. I think he's the other guy who's sort of I'd vote for him for the Hall of Fame, despite being a one inning closer without, 500 saves or whatever. So got my fingers crossed, but we'll see.
Yep, that we will. We got to wait a couple more months for that.
I think Dan Szymborski said something about this being a big year of first year voters.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that there was like a big BWA expansion 10 years ago that's kicking a lot of people onto the ballot for the first time. So maybe that'll change the electorate and make the prognostication a little less straightforward than it's been the past couple of years.
That's a pretty good way to describe it. It has kind of seemed straightforward over, I'd say, the past 2 years at least. Yeah, I'm just excited to see how the Hall of Fame ballots shake out. I know we got our first public ballot. I'm blanking on who from,
today.
But I know I
don't
saw
remember
it
who it was.
Yeah, I know I saw it.
Ryan Thibodeau's the only voter who matters, so it's
Fair enough. So, hey, tell our listeners, tell us, where have you been? What have you been doing? Like, what's your professional history, man? I want to hear this.
Where have I been?
Yeah.
So I started out, I went to journalism school at South Carolina. One of my best friends dating back to middle school is a guy named Paul Boyer, who had a Phillies blog at the time. I started writing for that, and then we got picked up by progressively bigger and bigger sites. We wrote for Burn Alley together, which was on the lamented, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember the ESPN Sweet Spot network.
No.
Never
heard of that.
So this was I think Rob Nyer was the guy who set this up. ESPN had affiliate sites like SB Nation did, independently owned blogs that all came together for this sort of content. And so, it was good. A lot of people got their start on these kind of sites. Just at Crash Burn, Paul went to work for the league. Now he's doing a Philly specific podcast. Mark Longenhagen, who is our prospects guy. He and I wrote there together. Corinne Landry, who's now the Phillies director of baseball ops, blog there. And then at FanGraphs, and Spencer Bingle, Ben Harris, a couple other people who are now working in front offices throughout the league. So this was like a big, recruiting ground, basically.
Yeah.
It's very high quality as team blogs go. And, it's since passed by the wayside, but I came up in an age when, a really good time for bloggers, when that movement was sort of, the web 2.0 movement was sort of starting to get its legs, and people were coming from, I guess I'd say like the generation behind guys like Grant Brisbee. He'll enjoy me aging him like that, but who sort of came from the amateur ranks to the professional ranks. So while I was doing this, I was working at a tech trade pub. I was in grad school, and then in 2013, got pulled off the street. Basically, I got the Courtney Cox pulled onto the Bruce Springsteen Agent Dancing in the Dark moment. When Chris Ryan, who's a Phillies fan, who's now a bigwig at the Ringer, he was at Grantland and recruited me to blog about baseball for them. And so I did that for a few years until the site shut down. Moved over to the Ringer a few months later after stops at D1 Baseball and Baseball Prospectus. And I was there until mid 2022, at which point I joined FanGraphs. So I'm entering my years entering my third full season there. I've been, write usually 3 or 4 times a week, usually 4, and just pick up topics around the league and, go to a decent amount of Phillies games, try to talk to guys that as they're coming through town. I mean, the draft combine every year, which is fun because I get to talk to next generation of future big leaguers before they get media training. So
That's
I've
terrible.
had some fun there. Yeah, and like I've loved college baseball. The school I went to is a big college baseball powerhouse, or I guess it was then, less so now. But I love watching players at that stage of their development and always have. So that's it's fun to dip my toes back into that pool every so often. So that's the resume.
All right. See,
I'm almost
I
now.
asked for it. Did you get a little older just reading off the resume a little bit there?
I try not to think about how far in the past 2013 is.
Yeah, fair enough.
The Hall of Fame thing, I was like, man, I really have been doing this a long time now.
You're almost there, Michael. You're almost there. Thank you for running it down, because there are so many people that I think I've only been doing this like 3 years or so. I've just seen so many people come in and out and back in again. It's always good to hear where folks have been and like how they've sustained this thing that is baseball writing.
Yeah, it took a long time to get to make literally $1 off of this. It took probably about 3 years before I started getting paid even a little bit. And so, the industry being what it is, I don't know that hopefully, we're seeing a backlash against the heavy algorithmatized, anti-click-through social media sites. But, a big part of my generation of writers coming through was being able to promote yourself on Twitter and through these blog networks that don't really exist anymore. And so, and it's not even just promotion. It's like, I write for Sweet Spot. I can go talk to, people who are, Christina Carl was an editor at ESPN who I worked with a little bit. So I, knew this fairly big person in baseball media. All the other bloggers from the other teams. So you get to read them and sort of bounce ideas off of them, and just being able to meet people. The actual networking of social networks is something that we're losing a little bit. And hopefully, we've just had a watershed moment with the Twitter exodus. So
hopefully
we'll
so. I've been reading a book by a couple of New York Times reporters called Character Limit. And that's been something that they've touched on a lot, is how Twitter went from being like the local market setting that it was originally intended for, and morphed into what it is now. I'm hoping Blue Sky is that replacement. Hopefully, maybe it's got a early 2010s Twitter.
It's closer now than anything has been since the Genuine article. So I'm a little optimistic about that.
Good.
The site has the juice, as everybody's saying.
As all the kids say. Well, I practically bullied Jeremy into getting an account on there again.
I gave you your invite code.
So, Michael, to be fair, they kicked Jeremy off at first, it seemed.
What'd you do?
Okay, so everyone was saying they were moving over a while ago, and then so I was like, all right, I created an account, and I was doing all this stuff.
And then I said a bunch of slurs, and
and I was like, no one's here, and so then I got bored, and I deleted my account, and then when I went to sign up again, because everyone was moving over, and they looked like they're really moving over this time, and I went to sign up, and they're like, yeah, your account, your handle's not available, and I'm like, but I deleted it, no one else is using it.
No, don't delete. You just got to let it sit dormant.
Yeah, so I signed up under a new username, and then a couple days later, I found the feature that's like switch your username, and I just switched it to my old one, and it let me. So,
just crazy how it works.
No harm done.
No harm done. So we're all over Blue Sky, big Blue Sky fans over here. Michael, I'm just curious, any other big off-season stuff that's burning a hole in your brain right now? It's pretty dang quiet right now, man. It really is.
Yeah, this is usually a pretty dead period. The time between, there are guys who signed before Thanksgiving, which I wrote about, actually, if you want to go scroll back a little bit in my FanGraphs author profile. Around Thanksgiving it slows down, and then everybody's just sort of waiting for the winter meetings, and then the big free agents are, we'll see if Juan Soto holds up the guy, Pete Alonso's not going to sign until Soto does, basically, and then all those dominoes fall from there. So we'll see how that shakes out. I think it will be a little less tetchy than the Ohtani media blackout was last year, because Ohtani's
Hopefully.
a unique player with a really weird guy for an agent. And, we all know how Scott Boras operates, and he's
Right.
predictable, but like he's a known quantity, and so everybody has the ability to set expectations, and he's going to leak enough to keep his clients' names in the news. So
I was going to say, like, we didn't
which
even
is
know
all what the reporters need. So
we didn't even know where Ohtani was necessarily, talking to people, and like we get daily updates about Juan Soto is going to the New York Mets today, and tomorrow he's going to the Dodgers.
And, you want to know how this went? Like, look how Bryce Harper's free agency or Garrett Cole's free agency went. Yeah. Like, it's the same thing. So, I think things are going to be much less weird than they were last offseason. Maybe, but Boras does like to keep his, to wait the market out. But
Right. Well, hey, Michael, I figured this was a good time to get to our Royals reviews for all of our listeners out there. I ambushed Michael with this. Like, hey, by the way, you got to think of something over the podcast. So, but right now, Honey promised us a review of Wicked, which we went and saw this weekend. So I'm going to hand the horn over to her real quick for this review.
I completely forgot I was supposed to give this review. Anyway, I think my new rule is that unless John M. Chu directs the film adaptation of a Broadway musical, I will not see it, because he did In the Heights, and he's a phenomenal director. He's actually one of my favorite in all of Hollywood right now. And he only improved upon and made In the Heights better. They didn't mess with the source material. They didn't mess with kind of like electronic adaptations or additives to the music, etc., like they did when they did Mean Girls, and he only made it better. And that was exactly what he did with Wicked. He just really has a talent for making his cast shine and for storytelling. So I grew up with Wicked. It is my absolute all-time favorite musical, and I was very nervous about them adapting it for film, and what they would do with it. I don't love that they split it into two parts, only because I feel like the momentum that is gained in Act 1 is very much needed to carry through Act 2. But it's long, and the bits and pieces that he added really worked to flesh out characters and clarify different things, and he literally only made it better. It was everything a film adaptation of a Broadway musical should be. He only added to the magic. There was nothing in it that detracted from it. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande were phenomenal. Jonathan Bailey smashed it with Dancing Through Life. He was the perfect cast choice for Fiyero. So if you haven't seen it, please go see it and enjoy the magic, because it's my favorite thing in the world, and I think everyone should get a chance to see it.
I'll go next. So I will talk this time about a TV show I've been watching lately, which is Only Murders in the Building, which is the Hulu show starring Selena Gomez, Martin Short, and Steve Martin. They try to run their true crimes podcast that is only about murders that happen in their building. And I just was like, how can a show about murder be funny? But somehow the three characters are all very charming, and all the supporting characters end up like entertaining me in really good ways. Whereas like there's a lot of, even though it's set in a really fancy apartment building in New York, there's a lot of the same vibe you'd get from something like a Gilmore Girls or a Heart of Dixie that's like set in a small town with a whole bunch of kooky characters. So it's like the Arconia is like a small town that happens to also be in New York. And it's very charming. It's very fun. It's very sweet, and it's very goofy. So if you like murder mysteries, if you like true crime podcasts, or you like charming, goofy things, then I can recommend at least the first 3 seasons. I haven't watched the 4th season yet. I'm sure it's the same, but I haven't seen it, so I can't say for sure. Only Murders in the Building.
All right. Michael, it's your turn.
All right, I'd like to stump for Anora, which is a movie that had seen trailers for and seen, promotional stuff where I was like, oh, this looks like pretentious indie nonsense. And then film critic Vince Mancini, who I like a lot, said it was the best movie of the year, and he didn't have any notes. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll go see this. And it's about a sex worker in Brooklyn who is asked to dance in the VIP at her strip club for the son of a Russian oligarch. And he, takes a liking to her, and they get married, and then hijinks ensue. And it's a very tense movie that involves like sort of a lot of legal gray areas and intimidation, and they're the best characters in this movie are the thugs who come to try to dissolve the marriage. And despite that, and so I've seen, just because of the vibe of the movie, people compare it to Uncut Gems. And the difference between this movie and Uncut Gems is every time there's something that's scary or tense, there's something hilarious happening in the background in Anora, which it's the original definition of comic relief. And so you find yourself in this really ridiculous, threatening situation and laughing because there's just the most perfectly executed pratfall like since the Three Stooges in this movie, like the climactic peak. And it's just everything's tense and scary, but it's also hilarious at the same time, and it just puts you through the emotional ringer, and it is every bit as good as hype. So it's not for everybody. There's just more swearing and nudity than you could possibly fathom, but it's incredibly funny and emotional, and it's just meticulously written and shot, and everything is intentional, and everything is it looks, I think it was like an $8 million budget. It looks like it cost $80 million just because everything is framed so well. So I was very impressed. It's it's shorter than Wicked too. I was going to say my hesitation of seeing Wicked is they made half of a movie musical that's almost 3 hours long to begin with. Ooh. Like, I'm going to be a Hall of Fame voter soon. I don't have time to, to spend on
movies and things like that.
So you got to get your bang for your buck, and Anora definitely gives you that.
Perfect.
So to speak, which, that's not the best. Shouldn't have said bang for your buck in a movie about a sex worker, but
Michael, shame on you.
You fit in here just fine.
Yep. Don't you worry about that. Well, hey, I guess if you're stumping for a movie, I'll stump for a Substack. Mainly Michael's, which I just read through the last free one that you had, the sneak peek at the 2025 Tour de France. Wheelie Sports. I know we mentioned it earlier on, but it's just what is the scope of this Substack, Michael? I gotta know.
I mean, it started when I was looking for an alternative writing project. And this was, one of the things, pull back the curtain. It's one of the reasons that I left the Ringer is like, I didn't have the ability to go out and do my own stuff. And so I've been interested in cycling, a sport that bears very little resemblance to baseball in form, but I think in culture and vibe, it's very similar. It's got this vast history. It's a very slow burn, and you spend, watching it, you spend 3 hours waiting for something to go wrong, which is be a feeling familiar to any baseball fan. And so I wanted to try to write about it in a way that's accessible, to people who aren't spending $7,000 on a crit racing bike, or, not going to France to view the Tour de France, and to casual American fans, and write about it in a way that's fun. And there's just some incredible characters. There's been some great racing this year. You can go back and look at the women's road race at the Olympics this year was incredible. It was won by an American, not to spoil things. There's
I'm gonna watch that tonight.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, well go back and watch if you can find it, watch the last stage of the women's Tour de France. That was even better.
Okay.
It's a sport that I think rewards a minimal effort to understand what's going on. And this audience, the American audience, has not been very hospitable to it since Lance Armstrong, ruined an entire generation's worth of goodwill. It's try to take a lot of the humor and a lot of the historical economic focus that I have with my baseball writing and put it into this new medium. If you're looking for something to watch, there's a Tour de France Unchained is the name of the series on Netflix. If you're familiar with Formula One's Drive to Survive or Hard Knocks, it's very similar. You could probably get that's not a bad intro to the sport if you want to try to get to a position where you can watch the Tour de France and really know the faces and the players and how the game is played. So
Okay.
It's, I would say, a minimally successful Substack, but I enjoy doing it, so I keep doing
That's
it.
all that matters.
Yeah.
That's all that matters, man. No, and that's what I was just clicking through here a little bit. Like you have the crash course. It seems like personally, I don't know anything about cycling. I know about the Tour de France is yellow. Okay,
yes.
that's about it. So I enjoyed reading through the crash course here that you have.
So I would say, like, whether you read anything else in my newsletter or not, if you read the crash course, you'll understand enough to be able to follow the Tour de France next year or Paris-Roubaix or any of the other, just understand, like, basically there's more to this than just getting on your bike and pedaling as hard as you can until the race is over. So
that's important. So again, that's Wheelie Sports over on Substack. If you don't know how Substack works, you can subscribe to newsletters, writers. I mean, we've talked about David Lesky on this podcast before. We absolutely love his Substack, and it just delivers it right to your email inbox whenever a new publication is put out. So I love Substack, and I love the diversity of voices and diversity of topics that I see written about over at Substack. But go check out Wheelie Sports.
Newsletters are the new blogs.
Yeah, it's kind of a similar thing, isn't it? Like, it feels like Substack is kind of copying what the first blog boom was,
Yeah, tech bros invent the blog. That's the.
Fair enough. Well, hey, Michael, thank you so much for joining us this evening. This was a great chat. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I might even say I mildly enjoyed myself. Again, all the social media links for Michael are going to be down in the podcast description below, but make sure you go check out his and the team's writing over at FanGraphs. We cannot stress enough to go support FanGraphs. A lot of good data over there, but a lot of good writing as well at FanGraphs.
And I would say we're making a membership push. We just instituted a metered paywall. So, like, I think it's I should know this.
I think it's $5.
It's $5 a month, but it's I think the limit is 20 articles a month. So if you go beyond that, you want to, or you have to pay $5 a month. But also, it's a ton of content. All the data is still free. Even if you don't like me, there are a ton of other good writers and good people on the site. People who know a ton about baseball and don't have to hide behind jokes in order to obfuscate their ignorance. So I would definitely encourage you.
That Jacob and I are comfortable with anyone reading anything like that.
It's a bargain at twice the price. So FanGraphs membership is a great Christmas gift to yourself or to the baseball fan in your life.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, thanks for plugging that because I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, just in case David Appelman is listening to this podcast, I'm being a good company man, David.
Yeah, David, we give him a 5-star review on being company man over here at the podcast. But that is going to do it for us this evening. Make sure you go check out RoyalsReview.com for all the Royals-related coverage that you need in your life. Plus, Jeremy and our social media links are going to be down in the podcast description below, so don't miss that. I'm Jacob Milham. Thank you so much for joining us, and until next time, go Royals!